All right, so I would like to call the August 21st meeting of the Heinsberg Development Review Board to order. I guess first thing on the list to ask is agenda changes. I hear we have something.
Yes, we have one addition. We have a request for a 6-month extension for the Heinsberg Center 2 development, which should be added to the first thing of other business.
That's Brett, right?
Yes, that is true.
So has he been participating on well and water and sewer issues? Because he hadn't been.
Yes,
Because I saw in the last memo that he supposedly had, but
he actually
that's news
has.
to us.
Yeah, he has an
Or at least
allocation, but I'll talk about it more a little later on.
Or maybe we don't.
Or, you know, if you want, I guess we could do it now if you'd like
Well,
to do it now.
I guess let's go ahead and do it now since we're waiting for an applicant, and
Okay.
then we can talk about the minutes. And
All right. I'll just mention that he has been working with the select board to get his water and sewer allocation. Select board needed a little bit of time in evaluating and was able to provide him with an allocation, but they ran out of time as far as their current one, and they're requesting a 6-month extension. I want to mention that did receive, since I was a little concerned about having enough people as far as voting on this, and it actually expires today, that I actually received yeses on a vote for this from Dennis and John Slayson. So if any questions on that, something that Planning and Zoning does support.
No, I'm happy to support a 6-month extension.
And just to clarify for the record, this is an extension to the sketch plan approval that the board granted some time ago, and you've issued a series of extensions because of the water and wastewater issues the town's been having.
But I feel like as long as he's making a good faith effort to work through it and
At
has
least
been in
now.
contact.
Yeah, we feel like he has. He's not, just to clarify, he's not been working collaboratively with the town to bring the new well online the way BlackRock has, but that well is on BlackRock's property, and but he has been working to get the allocation, and he just did last week. So we expect a preliminary plat application soon. Now that he has that.
So was that a motion, Greg?
Sure.
I'll second it.
Okay. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
I will abstain, but I
Well, I
would
then we don't have a
vote
quorum.
yes.
Well, we have two on.
Right.
Oh,
Yeah,
right,
we're
yeah,
on.
you're right,
Okay.
you're right.
So-
So
we
I-
have-
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fine.
So yeah, you're free to abstain.
And we don't have any minutes to approve, do we?
Yes.
We do
Yes.
have minutes.
Oh, and we don't need a quorum for those.
We do not. So, okay, that's it for the agenda changes. If we can look at the minutes. I only saw one thing. On page 7, about halfway down, it says Dick J. replied that the board would enter deliberative session. I hope what I said was that we could enter deliberative session if the board was so inclined, not that we would. And I think you could also add that at the suggestion of Alex, it was decided to discuss any staff requirements during the open session. Just so nobody think that we went into deliberative session, but it wasn't mentioned anywhere else. So that's all I saw.
Move to approve as amended?
I'll second that.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. So, moving on. We have our first applicant. Yeah. Got it up there?
It's the United Church.
United Church, that's the one. Okay. For site plan changes for lighting. So you're welcome to,
All right.
I don't see a mic for you to use there.
I can, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm representing the United Church of Heinsberg, and it's,
Just Could we get your name?
who you are. Phil Pouch, representing the United Church of Heinsberg. And we've been looking at the lighting around the church for a number of years. I know we've talked with Alex a few times, and now finally said, all right, let's
put it in, we think we've got a good plan. Primarily, the majority of it is really for safe circulation, which comes right out of the zoning regs. And then we have the one light in the front of the church, really is just to illuminate the front of the church a little bit. So I'll put that light off to the side for now. You can see we have one mounted now on the side of the church, the south side of the church. To the west, there's already two spotlights there. Okay. Try not to get anybody in the eye. Right here, there is already a couple spotlights there. And there have been other lights over the years, but right now there's just the one light there. And we want to put these RAB Slim lights on the church. I think it says a height of 22 feet. 22 feet, which is kind of high, but this does drop down. And our goal is to try to illuminate, a good portion of the parking area. And these lights do meet, I have the spec sheets, which I think you had, but I actually have there's some more spec sheets. They meet the International Dark Sky Association for full cutoff, fully shielded lights. And just to be clear, these lights, while there are some church activities that happen at night, and I'll put a plug in for the Chicken Pie Supper, the annual Chicken Pie Supper, which is the last Saturday in October. It's quite a community event. And when we do that, it's nighttime, and it's dark, and we have a lot of folks that just have a hard time getting around. We usually add some lights, some hand lights, just to help people find their way. But the majority of the activities that are happening at night are community events. Now it's on Monday nights. Every Monday we have a group there, community event, and then there are other events. We also have a lot of parking that goes on there, supporting the soccer field and things like that. So those are the two primary lights for the parking lot. Then we are looking to add another one here. Again, that meets the dark sky rules, to sort of help in this area here. So that's primarily for the parking, those three lights. Then we plan to move this LED spotlight over into the corner here. These other ones will be on, basically on timers, and today they tend to shut off at 10 o'clock. So they'll either shut off at 10 o'clock or at a certain point they'll have motions. So we're unsure which way, but at a certain point they'll be off. So they're not on all night long. And we want to move, this is a new spotlight we have here, we'd like to move that over to the corner here, put that on, strictly on a sensor. And the purpose of this, again, is we have those soccer fields that people come through here. There's also a walkway from the town hall. It's a developed walkway that goes to the side of the church. So people park at the town hall, either go to the church or the soccer fields or vice versa. And like at Chicken Pie Supper, people park there, but there's no lighting at all. And so from this parking lot is lit, but then you walk down a little ways and it's pitch dark, can be pitch dark. So the idea would be if somebody is walking down that path, that light would come on and illuminate, at least show them where to go. And again, that would just be on a motion sensor. So that's the...
So is that, and Mitch, is that the light in your staff report that you were saying should be replaced with a downcast?
Yes.
And so that, if you were looking at that walkway doesn't really go by here. It tends to go from here around like that, next to that tree. And then the last light is right here, and that would be on like a 2 or 3 foot pedestal right in front of the walkway and the stairs. And the idea here is it would be a spot, and we have the specs on that. And it would just illuminate the very front of the church. We totally would accept conditions that say it can't spill over and all that. That's not the purpose. It's just to really light up the front of the church. And, you know, the real purpose there isn't necessarily for safe circulation. It's to illuminate the front of the church a little bit. And we feel that that church adds to the village feel, and that by doing that, it does enhance the village. This is my personal opinion, that it does enhance the village. That one would be on a timer, and that would be off at 10 o'clock. The same thing, we have a couple of lights that light up our front little sign there, and they come on when it's dark, and they shut off at 10 o'clock. So the idea-
There's already approval for that.
Yes, yeah. So the idea here is we would place it in such a way, we've talked with our electrician who's helped us spec all these lights out. And he thought, yeah, it won't spill over the edge, it'll just really do the front of the church.
So on the front of the church, I agree. The illumination of the front of the church is beautiful. It really enhances the character of the center of town with a historic structure. How is the proposed lighting different from what's there now, which I'm familiar with?
Aren't any lights on it now. There is,
Well, after dark, the front would be lit up often.
unless we turn the lights on inside, yeah.
There
Oh,
used
no,
to
the
be
outside.
a spotlight
The
that's
outside.
shown on the church front, and it's not there right now. I always thought it was there all along, but
I
as Phil
remember
talked to
seeing
me
it so many
about this,
times, I haven't registered that it
Yeah.
hasn't
Oh,
been
yeah, no.
absent.
I don't think it's been there for several years.
Yeah.
But I remember it as well.
Well, I think that's an asset, as long as it's not on all night. So you're trying to recreate that projection?
Yeah, I mean, we think it looks
It's
pretty.
it's an historic
Yeah,
facade.
yeah,
I don't know,
right.
it's
Is
wonderful.
the objection of it being on all night if it's at strictly the front of the church? If maybe you're not asking, but I'm not sure that's.
My
I-
guess is,
I-
having seen the church finances, they probably don't want it on all night.
Our regulations, even the new ones that we're gonna do training on later tonight, don't speak to the hours for illuminating, historic buildings. So it could potentially be on all night. Personally, there aren't very many people driving through town experiencing the splendor of the village
It's also
after 10
shining up,
o'clock,
which is
so it seems
inconsistent with
unnecessary at that point,
The dark skies
through the night.
motif.
And it will create a night glow, even if it's properly shielded to focus on the church. So I personally like the idea of having that light go off with the others, at some hour, rather than having it on, at 2 in the morning or 3 in the morning.
Well, I figured it's about 3 kilowatts a month on the average, so I've already calculated how much it'll use if it shuts off at 10 o'clock. And like I said, we have a couple of small little lights, they shine down on that sign, and those come on when it's dark and they shut off at 10. So we're actually planning to tie this other one into that same system.
So do we have the specs for these lights? Because it wasn't in our package.
Yeah, no, I think they were. So,
In fact, the document that Mitch has up, it has a multi-page document, I think. Yeah, it's 8 pages. And,
so it's that one right there.
yeah, if you rotate the view, Mitch, you can see it.
So that's the front one.
Yeah, it's an LED, obviously. Designed for outdoors. And I think right now we're talking about just putting it on, just to get it above the flowers, there's some flowers in front, just to get, and out of the snow, the
Okay.
couple of feet of snow.
I looked at the first picture and I keep thinking that's one page.
Right,
I
yeah,
didn't
I
realize
do-
there are a whole bunch of other pages.
I do the
All right.
same thing, Dick. I forget these are multi-page PDFs.
Then I think there's other specs too, of the other couple of lights.
Okay, so this slim 26,
That one, the Slim 26.
that looks like it just sort of shines straight out?
Well, the Slim 26 would be the one, I believe that's in the, on the building, the Parish House building on the south corner.
Because it says, according to the picture, it shows it being on the south side of the church.
That one, oh, okay, let me look here.
It probably is tilted down. I mean, I don't think, it's probably just a standard picture, maybe that
Let me
makes
just look here. I played with these specs today. The,
So from that picture, I can't really tell where the light
yeah.
comes out.
I believe it comes out like on the bottom over here. But
Yes,
this is like a
that-
shield.
Okay, so that's a reflector,
yes,
and it's pretty
that
much
is
shining straight
correct.
down.
And those are the ones, the two
Okay.
on the church.
Right.
Yeah, I think that the light source is hidden and it's just, there's just light shining straight down. It, like Phil said, it's a full cutoff, fully shielded, wall-mounted light.
It says, Dark Sky approved. The International Dark Sky Association has approved this product as a full, cut-off, fully shielded luminaire.
So my question would be, something like that looks like it would illuminate a sidewalk that was directly along the side of the church nicely, but you're looking for that to light out into the parking lot.
And we've looked at it, and we're gonna get some light out into the parking lot. We, you know.
Okay.
It's mounted at 22 feet high,
Yeah.
so even if it's shining directly down, there's gonna be a fair amount of light that
Okay,
comes out from it.
okay, so it's not, I was envisioning a spotlight aimed out into the parking lot, so it's nothing like that.
No, it's,
Okay,
It looks like it's a shielded and downcasting light.
okay.
I have some concern with the floodlight in the back corner. Like, what if like a cat goes by? Is that gonna light up? Are there some apartments across, like, is there any residential back there?
No, it's right here. It's behind, there's one house in between, or two houses in between us. But there's a walkway that goes from the back.
No, I do know
parking
the
lot.
I do
Yeah,
know the
but
walkway,
there's
but
nothing else back there.
there isn't, I couldn't.
There's
There's
just the soccer fields.
well, it depends where the light is shining. There's one residential home, between,
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. The
between the
church.
commercial
Yeah.
building that's next to the church and the town hall. And, yeah, sorry. So, where are we here? So here's the church. Here's town hall where we are.
Right.
This is a commercial building.
Right.
Nobody's there at night. And then this is a residential house. So if there's a light here shining in this direction to try to give people walking from the town hall on this grass path a little bit of a target to get to, it just depends how it's positioned as to whether it's gonna shine out,
Okay.
you know, in this direction. These folks, I don't know, will they be able to see it? They might be able to. It's hard to say without
I
actually
didn't
being
know if
out
there
there.
was, if there was apartments above that commercial building, if that
There
was
are not.
mixed. Okay.
It's
that
a
was-
it's a full commercial building. That could change. It doesn't have to stay that way, but it's always been that, and it
Okay,
is today
that was
as
my,
well.
I didn't know if that was.
How long does the light stay on?
It'd be a typical one, I guess, a minute, 2 minutes, yeah.
Our
I think
new
they're
our new
adjustable.
regs, which do not apply to this application, that want to cut it off at no more than 5 minutes. I don't know what a
So we
typical
can
motion
do that.
sensor
We
is.
could certainly keep it less than 5 minutes.
Okay.
You know, on a typical evening, nobody's going by there, the soccer's done before it's dark.
Well, that's what I was thinking. I was like,
So
is it really even
almost would
necessary?
rarely come
Yeah.
on. But, you know, again, you know, so I'm there at the chicken pie supper and we're watching, you know, elderly people trying to, because there's not enough parking there for any activity that happens. And sometimes there are activities that go back and forth, you know, harvest activities and stuff. So it's just a dark spot and.
Does that operate on a switch too? Like that if you're not,
I
like you can turn
probably
it
would
off?
put a switch in there, I'm
because
sure,
that was
to
the
control it.
other thing. If it was, I
Right.
mean, for those events that are maybe 3 times a year and for the majority it's not a lot of people going
Yeah.
back and forth, that maybe
We
you
could
could
do that, yeah.
save some,
Yeah.
save some lumineers.
It's not intended to be security lighting,
No,
which is
no.
meant to come on when somebody's nearby to sort of spotlight them. Yeah.
No, it's not for security, it's
Just
really
says
just,
walk this way.
There's a,
event.
yeah, there's a walkway there, and when it's dark, it's hard to see. There's no other lighting back there.
Well, and sometimes they do, I mean, we've been back there for a lot of soccer and they call it at dark, but you're still straggling into your
Yeah.
parking lot. When
But,
it's got
but in
dark.
reality, Phil, that light positioned here is not gonna illuminate this
Yeah.
whole
I was gonna say,
hallway.
it's
No,
not
that's
aimed down
right.
the path.
It's just
It's
gonna get
really
much
just gonna
harder.
help you get around the corner of
Yeah.
the building,
Yeah.
cause there's a big tree right
There's a
there
big tree
too.
there,
Right.
So,
And so a downcast light, as Mitch has proposed, would do the same, would work? I mean,
Well,
I
the
assume just
walkway
taking a
doesn't
floodlight
really-
and pointing it down
it
doesn't meet what you were looking for.
Yeah, I mean, I think we'd be looking to point it, one, down toward the walkway, where the walkway comes into the yard, and then another one around that tree, in the back, behind that tree, just so you can see where you're going. Sometimes there's a picnic table back there, you can run into it.
So I guess my concern is that if it's not downcast, or at least with a shield or something on it, that, the people, could be looking at a bare bulb, which is not what they're supposed to be looking at. So, even if you use the floodlight, would it be possible to work out an additional shield just to make sure that, from the house, from that business, you're not actually looking at a light bulb?
I mean, I don't think we'd be aiming uphill, toward the roadway. And our hope is to reuse this fixture, which we already bought, LED one, that got swapped out with one that was there before. But, that was our hope. They may.
So I guess I'm not trying to disallow
Yeah,
using
they
that, but
may
I'm just
make
wondering
s-
if an additional shield could be attached to it to,
Maybe, yeah.
if it's a problem.
Yeah.
If, after it's installed, you're right, maybe the topology of the land makes it impossible to see a light bulb. But
We'd be willing to look at that.
I can see the neighbors being, I don't think we should impose on the neighbors with having a, light bulb coming on. Even if it's not shining, in their room, it's still, especially on a dark night. It's flipping on and off every time the cat goes by. Then I could see that be annoying, so, if we wrote an approval that requested that it either be downcast or that it be made to be downcast if a problem occurs, then you'd be amenable to that. So.
Yep,
Okay.
absolutely.
And I guess my only concern with the light on the front of the church is not so much spilling past the front. I'm pretty confident that you can aim it so it's only there, but it is a white church and white reflects. Due to the night sky thing and all that, that's one reason why I don't think you necessarily want it on all night. We just need to make sure that it's not creating a little local glow in the sky. Okay. So does the board have any more questions? So do we have any questions or comments from public?
Hi,
Yeah.
I'm Jen Olson. I live at 10575, right across the street from the church.
Oh, okay.
And I just wanted to say we're here to support the church being lit up in the ways that you guys have talked about. The dark sky thing was something that we just wanted to have preserved and make sure that light wasn't trespassing either into the road or into our house. But from what you're suggesting, it doesn't seem like that is going to be an issue. And from what we have noticed so far, like when we have our lights on beyond like our yard, it doesn't seem like it infringes further. So if that were to be the case for you guys as well, that would be
Well,
great.
and if we do go forward with this, if you had any issues, we certainly would
Yeah.
listen to it. Which one are you in?
We're like directly across the street with the side porch,
Okay.
along with the flowering tree
Yep.
and the side yard.
Jan's old house.
Okay.
Someday we'll get a crosswalk across where.
That would be so nice.
Yes.
The sidewalk was cut to
Yes,
allow
it
for one
is.
right
Yeah,
there.
someday we'll have a crosswalk.
Maybe
there.
when the select board decides to take over that section of Route 116, you never know.
All
You
right.
know someone on the select board?
We might all know someone on the select board.
Okay, so I don't have any other questions. Yeah, I would suggest we close the public meeting. And I guess ask staff to write up conditions for an approval.
Second?
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right,
Okay.
thank you very much for your hard work.
Thanks, Phil.
Yeah,
Good seeing you.
thanks.
All right, so move on to our new reg training.
Thank you for coming.
Yes, so on July 12th of this year, revisions to the zoning and subdivision regulations came into effect. The select board had adopted them a few weeks prior. And citizens did not petition for a townwide vote this time around, so they became effective. And they were not focused on any one particular section of the regs. It wasn't a targeted sort of regulation revision. It was an accumulation of many years' worth of housekeeping suggestions, both from this board as well as many from our previous zoning administrator, Peter Erb, some from citizens. And so there was a whole host of changes that were made. We did get your feedback prior to them being adopted on at least a couple of things. I remember talking to you specifically about some changes we were making to home occupation traffic levels and what level of review you felt comfortable with. That got boiled into the regulation revision. And so what was in your packet was a 7-page summary with a description of all the changes, and then the actual regs themselves, including a track changes version, which shows all the strikeouts and underlining of new language. And in the past, I've been sort of a monotone sort of, let's walk through every single one to help you understand them. Let's not do that. So many of these are minor. Some of them are not. I'm happy to mention the ones that are not. The select board asked me for a summary of those. But before we do anything, I just figured I'd see if anybody had questions, having looked at them, about anything specifically that you saw that you were either curious about. I'd be happy to have discussion, answer questions about technically what it means and how it's supposed to work, or why did you do that? You know, what's the purpose of that, and what was the thinking? I'm happy to speak to either of those.
I'm the kind of guy, speaking just for myself, who can figure out the why on some of this stuff, having been here a while. But I'm only interested in really dealing with these going forward, not so much.
Yeah, I mean, you will become accustomed to them as we, mostly Mitch, interprets them for you in staff reports, and you ask questions at your meetings, and that's all well and good. But there are some brand new pieces, and if you had questions, I'm happy to answer them. If not, they can come up at a later time. The outdoor lighting section, for example, is a completely brand new section. One that the church application came in before that became effective. So there'll be a learning curve on that one when you get your first site plan application that deals with lighting, because it's substantially more detailed and specific than what we had before, which was previously it was really just keep it downcast and shielded.
I did read through that.
Yeah. Anyways, did anybody else have questions about specific sections or topics?
I guess one that I was, the whole building height
That's a big one.
Oh, yeah.
that we ran into.
Yes.
Yeah.
It seems like the application we looked at, I thought kind of misused it. Because, first of all, so one question I would have is what grade do you assume and when do you assume it? If you assume that there was a 25% grade there at some point in recent history, but it's since been dug out and leveled, do you still get the credit for the former 25% grade, which is kind of the way I think the application that we talked about was using that, because it was an area that was leveled, and And it also seems to me this is for buildings that are built into the hillside, like the houses on Thistle Hill, or down Shadow Lane kind of thing. Not necessarily a building that's going to have the ground excavated all the way around it, just so they can say at one point the upper elevation where the building is now sitting used to be at X height, so therefore we get to have a bigger building.
Actually,
So the-
Hartford's very different from other towns on that. In other towns, they would basically, there are other towns that actually use the existing grade in their, the perimeter of what would have been the existing grade, and that, in essence, would be forever that particular number to whatever the highest point that's actually calculated, which is what's actually changed in these regs. But since Heinsberg actually has it where it's the finished grade, somebody who goes to a hillside, excavates it out, creates a level area, it's now counted from that level area, and what was there before is no longer counted.
And these regulations change,
That did change
revisions
it.
did not touch that. That's always been the case. And Mitch is right, other towns may use pre-original grade, many other towns use finished grade. I mean, it's a typical, it is the sort of international building standard, this definition. That was the suggestion made by one of our local architects who said, you're not consistent with building codes, that we use as architects across the country, and so why don't we make it more similar? But that issue of pre-existing versus finished didn't get touched in this definition change, and we've always had that issue. And so the subdivision that happened on Low Meadow Road, which is off of the Richmond Road, just before you get to Iroquois, there was a subdivision there 10 or 12 years ago. I think Peter Mead did it. And the first house that got built on, they elevated the site, and there was a lot of fill that got brought in and retaining boulders, and it still looks like that when you drive by it. And I remember after that house got built, the board at that time said, we didn't know that was going to happen. We assumed that it was going to be, minor cut and fill, not this huge, platform. And so after that, we had, and Greg probably remembers, we had a couple applications where the boards did in fact specify that there would be a benchmark prior to construction tied to an existing grade, and that elevations would be measured from that benchmark. But we haven't typically done that. We've just done that in certain circumstances. And you could still do that as a part of a subdivision review if you felt like that was an issue that was significant and needed to be accounted for.
Were they trying to get an Adirondack view?
Not in the Low Meadow Road case. I don't really know why they elevated the site quite as much, because there are no views from that location.
Really?
So
I know
yeah,
it's
I'm
low,
not
but-
sure what happened in that case. But my point was only that this change to the regulations doesn't address that, and that's not changing. What's changing is where on the building you measure to, not where you start from. Our definition has always been the average finished grade, but now it's where you measure to. Previously, we measured to the highest point of the roof, and now we're measuring to the midpoint of the highest roof elevation, the midpoint between the peak and the eave. And so you're measuring not to the highest point, but to a midpoint in between. And that allows for taller buildings with more steeply pitched roofs is essentially what it allows for.
Now, there's something in there about average too? Average height?
Yeah, well, we can look at the actual,
I
So
guess-
it's the
I'm
average grade, I guess I thought.
Well,
So
I
that's-
don't- I'm-
Average height means the
Oh, okay.
average level between the eave and the ridge. Not included are chimneys, spires, cupolas,
right?
antenna.
I'm concerned about fire safety. If you average out 20 feet and 100 feet, you're.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
It is a
that
done
was-
deal. We just have to
that was
enforce it.
discussed during this
Right.
whole proposed change, that it will allow for taller buildings, taller in the sense of how we used to measure building height anyways. But those buildings will be more likely to have pitched roofs, whereas the previous definition favored flat roof buildings. at the 35-foot height limit. And this allows for a 40-foot tall building to the peak, but with a pitched roof so that the midpoint becomes that 35-foot
So will
limit.
those people be advised that it may not be safe?
No, I think that the understanding is that
I mean, 'cause we don't have-
the living space within the building is still gonna be within the same 35-foot
The window?
range. That's the assumption anyways. that-
Because I'm thinking of access from a fire truck.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure. Yeah. Well, the area that would be less able to be accessed because it would be allowed to be above 35 feet would be that portion of the roof.
Just the
at
roof.
towards the peak. Anyway, that was the
Yeah,
intent behind
okay.
it, was to standardize it with international code and to favor pitched roofs rather than flat roofs. That Rob Bast was the architect who suggested this many years ago. And then the planning commission discussed it and thought it was a good idea. And so,
Sorry, I was just gonna say, if I can be blunt, then the thing that I'm talking about is the shed, the storage shed.
the salt
Yeah,
shed
the salt
for the
shed.
town highway garage area? Yeah.
And so, but what I'm understanding is, since the finished grade was flat,
Mm-hmm.
there was no averaging of grade in that height calculation. The thing is all roof, because it's one continuous roof. So if you
Actually,
measure
I
to
think there was like 6 feet of straightness, and then most of it was roof.
okay.
This
So they're
definition
averaging
definitely
six.
did not anticipate a building like that.
So
I-
between
I'm-
like 6 and 40, and the average is,
Yeah, so
Right.
it would be saying you have a 20-foot building when in fact the peak of it is up at 39.5 feet,
No, I
and
won't-
that just seems.
I won't lie to you. This regulation did not anticipate a building of that with a roof type like that, and so there was some question when the application came forward of whether it should be considered a flat or mansard roof, in which case the height is the top of the building, or whether it should be averaged. And in this case, it's unclear in the regs how you deal with a rounded roof. Because that's not technically a mansard roof, but a mansard roof, if you look at the definition, is a roof that has articulation in it. So it's not just a peak like
Like a
this. It comes like this, and then it comes again like that, and it has sort of multiple roof lines.
Like my building.
Yeah, and so you could almost envision a round roof just being
A
a
bunch
mansard
of-
roof
yeah.
to the infinite degree, right? But the regulation doesn't quite specify, so the salt shed went ahead.
Okay.
I think in the future, we might consider that other definition.
Yeah, and I think it might be, I mean, we just made the change, but I can put it on the list for the planning commission to think about again.
Yeah, you could.
Because in some towns, they actually have regulations that say that living space is limited on a certain height. So you could have it where it's like a roof, but it won't be a living space area, where a living space
Because
would
the
be
other
in
thing are
the-
those A-frames where the wall's only like 3 feet high, and then the rest
all
is
roof.
all,
Like the one on Route 116.
Yeah.
As you go south of the village, there's an A-frame house, and
yeah, it's like 3 feet, and probably the top is like 40, so the average would be. Yeah.
Right. But at the same time, in that case, the top probably 10 feet of that house
Is not livable.
are completely unoccupied
Yeah.
and of very little to no concern for fire protection or
Right.
anything else. Firefighter's not gonna be able to stand on it. It's too steep and nobody's in there.
That's where you now grow through your 3 pot plants.
That's right.
So just to be devil's advocate, I could see in a case where you have a tall building and you have some dormers. So yeah, it's all roof, but you have some dormers up there. So there is living space there. And the halfway point up that roof would be kind of looking in the dormer windows. So you could have living space.
We'll work through all these
Yeah.
issues.
I've got a couple.
Maybe in 5
Okay.
years, somebody will want to change what's already been changed.
So, can you speak to the change in landscaping standards? Because I feel like that's going to be a burden on the zoning administrator. Or are we supposed to be policing the soils of the medium
Yeah, so
What
plants?
section is that?
That's
It's in the landscaping regulations, which appear
4.3.8.
I'm sorry,
Yep.
say it again?
4.3.8
Okay.
of the zoning. It also appears in the subdivision regs in the landscaping section there. But that provision I will flip to it as well as Mitch is bringing it up on screen.
Because I just feel like that's going to be hard for us to monitor because we don't know soils. And are they going to do like a boring before they come, before they come with their landscaping plan?
So, what you would, as a board, want to ensure is that there's a specification in the landscaping plan that talks about what the soil composition for the tree planting areas should be. So, and you typically see that, but not always. And it should indicate that there's going to be, soil to this depth and not like
Is that
not crushed gravel.
Is that
and then
boilerplate? Because we don't know that as much, obviously.
yeah, it's fairly boilerplate.
Okay.
Maybe, is there a go-to person that we might think about, at least in the first year,
Yeah.
consulting with
Yeah,
on these
our
applications?
Our town tree warden has talked to us about this in the
Is
past.
he ready for this volume of questions?
Yeah, I think so,
Okay.
and I think we are as well. When Peter was here, he and I met with the tree warden, Paul Wizerak, and Andrea Morganti, who's a landscaper as well.
Paul is certainly knowledgeable.
Yeah, and we all agreed that having a tree planting specification was important, and we thought that encouraging there to be some independent review of that to the extent you felt it was necessary was also important. So input from Paul, I think, the tree warden would be good, but also just you have the ability to hire an independent landscape architect to review plans if you feel like that's necessary.
So I'm quite confident if Paul had problems, he would let us know,
Would you
and that would
bring
be a
the
trigger
most- do you
for.
bring, like what kind of size of project gets to Paul?
Yeah, it depends on whether trees are going to be planted in a road right away that the town might end up having responsibility for. If that's the case, even a small project would probably he would look
Any
at.
commercial or treescape or streetscape
Does he look at?
proposal, I mean,
Well,
we could ask him to look
In
at
the
it.
past, it's been the larger projects. So Creekside, Thistle Hill, Heinsberg Center,
Okay.
Green Street, those sorts of things. But we can talk to him about looking at whatever it is you'd like some input on. But where I was going with that was that there's a fairly simple planning look, which is during the review process, just to make sure that there's an adequate volume of soil for the tree and there's enough depth of soil, and then it's going, at least the specifications say it's going to be the right mixture of soil. Once it's been approved with that in mind, then it does become an enforcement issue, and the only way to ensure that it happens properly is to require some sort of inspection or sign off by a landscape professional, and in your larger projects you tend to require that. So we can at least do that much. I'll be honest with you. I think the pace at which construction happens and the priority that is given to projects during construction, and it's not tree planting, is such that we probably would need to have some person actually there inspecting before the trees go in the ground to
Well,
be
it
100%
caught
certain.
my eye that I was like, oh, that's gonna be
Yeah.
an enforcement issue.
Well, part of the point of putting it in the regs is to give you the power to compel someone to have the necessary detail on their plans so that when they hand those plans to a contractor, if they know how to read and follow a plan, it gets done properly. But the other part is to allow the zoning administrator to undertake an enforcement action. If, for example, trees get planted 2 years later, the tree is dead, and the zoning administrator says, I need a sample there to find out what you actually planted
Okay.
this in, and it's not adequate, and they can, get something remedied. So yes, the short answer is it will be additional enforcement work. How that enforcement work happens will be a function of the conditions you place on approvals.
It actually
I
might-
think you nailed it with a lot of it, as long as the plant is living,
It was fine.
it should be okay. I mean,
Right, as long
if-
as it's alive and it's
Right.
growing vigorously,
I mean-
we're happy.
I mean, if the soil needs to be a foot deep, and they say, well, geez, if anybody can get away with 8 inches, I mean, it's gonna be up to them to replace if it doesn't work.
Right, and we may be facing that in some of our development projects. we've been working with Brett Grabowski on the Heinsberg Center project. That's a very densely developed, compact site. And some of the tree planting areas that you approved required there to be what are called structural soils underneath the parking areas, so tree roots could get out into them, which they can't really do in compacted gravel base for parking lots. And I've noticed that some of those trees, well, one has had to be replaced already, and others are, not in a good way. So we'll see what happens
I
on
mean,
that
certainly
front.
the goal is you don't wanna wait and see.
No, you'd like to
You
have
want
it done right the
have-
first time and have the trees have a chance to really get established and not have to replace them after 5 years or 6 years. But
Hopefully, that being said, that the developer or whoever is gonna say, well, it's gonna be cheaper to do it right the first time.
And
Hopefully.
not only that, the board could ask for a certification from a licensed professional that actually has been planted correctly. And I would say actually from an enforcement issue side of it, this may actually make it a little easier because it's kind of spelled out. Did you actually do these things?
I think-
We
Result
used to have
indicate
Zoe,
no.
and she like knew, you know,
Yeah.
that's where I feel like, like we don't know that as much.
Yeah.
I think if we ask, like you just
For
said, the
Paul, so.
definition of what it's gonna be and
yeah, I think for any project that has substantial tree plantings, you should be asking for a tree planting specification. So typically you see in engineering plans, a site plan and then sheets 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, which show like concrete curb specifications and
ditch has to be X amount of
yeah,
feet,
and sewer
stone
connections and all that.
one
One
inch
of those
stone.
sheets should be a planting specification, which shows you, how much soil is in the tree planting area and what it's composed of and all that. And those are fairly boilerplate.
Okay. And then does anybody else? I was moving through my list.
Good.
And then can you explain the access strip allowance was confusing to me.
Yeah. Let me-
So if you have the section, I don't have.
Oh,
this
sorry,
one.
sure. 5.7.1.
Right, isn't that's been there if I'm not mistaken?
Okay.
So what this does, let me get to that section too. This is a change, but it's a fairly minor change.
Okay. Because I remember,
Actually,
I remember
doesn't
it
come
coming
up.
up sometime with the corners. It has come up with the corner being if a driveway is a street.
Right.
So
That was first, and I'm glad they clarified that. That
right.
was
So
back.
in 5.7.1, we're clarifying a couple different things. One, Mitch has it up here, maybe. Yeah. So if you scroll down a little bit, Mitch. Perfect. Right there is good. So in number 3, what happened to our laser pointer? Is that still kicking around?
You still have it. I think it's under there.
Oh, yeah. So in number 3 here, we're deleting this piece that says an access strip shall be considered as a right-of-way for the purposes of setback requirements. We don't want there to be setbacks from access strips. We want that setback to begin once you enter the parcel itself. So that's deleted so that we don't have unintended setback restrictions along the strip. And then we go on to say that right here in number 4, what it used to say is that if you had an easement or a right-of-way that was in existence prior to 72 when zoning went into effect, that was less than the minimum width above, you can still develop that property. We didn't want to close off people's ability to develop their property because they had a narrow right-of-way, if that was the historic access to the property. But the regs didn't also address the situation of when an access strip, not a right-of-way, but an owned strip of land, was narrow. And that was the only way to get into a property. So this just added the word access strip so that people who had a parcel with, instead of a 50 or 60 foot wide access strip, maybe only had a 20 foot wide access strip, that they would still be able to develop their property.
It wouldn't be like land.
It wouldn't be
Yeah.
considered landlocked, right?
Okay.
So those are the 2 changes that we made there. Because access strips, function similarly to a right-of-way.
So I feel like it wasn't described like that in its little description. It was talking, but I get it. It was about front yard setbacks.
Yeah, because one of the other things we did with this in terms of the definition of a street is to clarify that a right-of-way that serves just a single house
It's not a street.
is not a street and does not create the need for front yard setbacks. And that's been our practice, but Peter and I went through tortured discussions about having that be our practice over the years. And this just sort of codifies that if you've got a parcel with frontage on one street and then you've given your neighbor a right of way across your property to get to their land in the back, you didn't just create the need for a front yard setback along
From
that
that
right of
right-of-way,
way that
yeah,
you
okay.
gave to your neighbor, as long as it only serves your neighbor's house. If it serves multiple houses, then it's a street.
okay,
then
and so
you
I'll give
gotta-
you one example on one project that this might have been a problem. The Goodrich subdivision that ended up getting sketched didn't get past that. But literally, since the proposed Observatory Road extension was going to be right along the edge of that property, if you would have measured 60 feet from that center line to a number of the properties that were to the south of it, you would have had existing structures which would then become non-conforming. And this is something that actually kind of clarified that it wouldn't necessarily be the case.
What else you got, Sarah?
Oh, one more, then I'm done. And I know we talked, but they decided to remove the affordable housing incentive, and that was because the assumption would just be that you hopefully had affordable housing, that you didn't get an incentive, the reasoning behind it.
That was a select board call. They, and a department of, our utilities department, water and sewer, they felt that the water and sewer connection fees and allocation fees were needed to pay for the system, and that regardless of whether it was affordable housing or market rate housing, those fees needed to be collected. And that if we were going to give affordable housing a pass on certain fees, it should be on other fees that were not as necessary.
Okay, so that used to be an incentive, was that they
Yeah.
didn't have to pay for hookup?
Exactly, yeah, we said, and we still do say that we will waive the zoning permit fee and the per lot fee on the subdivision applications to your board, and a couple other incentives on that front. We used to say we would also waive the water and wastewater allocation and connection fees, and the select board said, no, that's not the right policy. We need those fees from everybody.
Is there still a density bonus?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, this is just about that one,
okay.
small incentive, which actually wasn't that small. I think right now the allocation fees
I
for a
got
single.
confused. I thought it was a density bonus
Oh,
incentive.
no.
Okay.
It's just a cash benefit.
Okay.
Right now, I think a single family home would pay about $12,000 in water and wastewater allocation fees and hookup fees. So that would be something an affordable housing
Wow.
unit would save under the old system, but not anymore.
I think Rain Street
Need that money.
saves a lot of money on that when it's actually developed.
Oh,
So I
yeah.
don't think they end up paying those fees. That was a huge cost.
Green Street?
Yeah.
Yeah, they did. So they got lucky because now it's changed and they had to pay it.
They may have been the reason.
That one I 100% agree with. You just put a building on the system, it doesn't really matter. You need to be paying your part.
Right. Well, and we have a very small system that's expensive to run, so that's not the place we want to shave revenue.
That was it. Sorry. Thank you.
That's okay. Anybody have any others? So aside from the outdoor lighting standards, which are brand new, the only other one I wanted to call to your attention was the a change in the subdivision regulations, where previously we had a blended system for boundary line adjustments. Some of them were just approved administratively by the zoning administrator, and you never saw them. Others, if they were a larger transfer of land, had to come for you for a very strange sort of informal review where you determined or verified this is not a subdivision, the zoning administrator may now proceed with the, so that got changed. You won't be seeing those anymore. The boundary line adjustments are just a single review process now. It's all administrative, doesn't come to your board unless it's a revision to a previously approved subdivision. And, but the other big change is that there will now have to be a survey for what's being adjusted. So previously two parties could just write up a deed and describe the transfer that way, have an attorney write it up. Now they'll have to hire a surveyor and have something recorded. But you won't see it. It'll just be handled by the zoning administrator. And there's lots of other goodies, but you can read about them. We can talk later.
Already did.
All right.
You want me to go back to the lighting one, Alex?
No, I think my intention for the rest of the meeting was to step out of the building and go visit one or two sites. Given the time, maybe we'll just do one. I have.
Where are you gonna go, Alex?
I was gonna
so I
take
can
us.
see it.
Yeah, I've got
On my
plans
own.
I can give to you, Greg, since you need to take off. I got plans for Heinsberg Center, where Kenny Drugs is.
Yep.
And Jiffy Mart. So if you want to look at those at another time, there
Okay.
are some lighting plans. And so these lighting plans were approved by this board. Both of these projects went in and, like, Kinney's went in 2011, Jiffy Mart went in 2012. So the lighting is about 7 years old or something.
10-word assessment of whether we were successful.
So here's the thing, the new lighting standards were written with these projects as sort of examples
Past
to
10
try
rounds.
to emulate them, because I think these were successful. I think these were good projects. Now, with that said, neither of these projects submitted as much information as projects going forward will have to submit. So there are some gaps in what we know about them because of that. And in some cases, there might be some bright spots that we would no longer allow under the new regs. But by and large, these two projects sort of emulate what the new regulations are trying to have happen. The Kinney's project in particular was originally approved by your board with much brighter lighting, and they came back shortly after that approval and said, at staff's urging, saying, yeah, it's brighter than it needs to be, and then you approved a reduced lighting package. And I think the result over by Kinney's is really good, because it does not illuminate the night sky. It's not glaring and sort of objectionable, and yet when I walk around on the site, I can see where I'm walking, and I can see in front of me, and it's white lighting, so there are natural colors that I can identify if, I needed to understand what color car, hit mine and then peeled off or something like that. So both of these projects, I think, did a pretty good job. And so, yeah, my thought was maybe we could go over to one or both of them and.
Is there an example of something where we could have done a much better job?
So I want to say the mobile station, but I haven't been there recently.
That's a long time ago.
It's a long time ago. They did replace their lighting, but I don't think they came back in front of the board because it was just, swapping things out for LEDs. Actually, I can give you it's not, we've seen the enemy and it's us example. This building has well done lighting in the back parking lot. Some would say there needs to be a little bit more actually, but it's downcast and shielded and modest. But on the front of the building, as you drive by or walk by, we have a building mounted light, which is under the porch, and there's a porch roof. So it's not, it's fully downcasting in the sense of the porch keeps it from going up in the night sky, but it's a wall pack that shines directly out at the street. And so it illuminates the whole porch, the sidewalk, and the road out in there. And that's an example of a light that the town should replace with something that's, not in driver's eyes.
You could put a light up in the port pointing towards the doors. so it
You
illuminates.
could, or you could just put more of a downcasting light that had enough spillage that it covered the porch steps. In any case, I can't think of an actual.
Some shielding could possibly
That's
work.
working out okay?
CVU has pole heights, I think, that are larger than what the new regs would allow for. But it's not an overly lit site. And in fact, when we were talking about the Hannaford project, in the first go around,
Yeah.
we used CVU as an
Lighting.
example to Hannaford to say, go look at them. That's a
They're
major
really tall
public.
lights and they don't spill.
Right, and it's pretty modest in terms of overall lighting. So yeah, I think CVU's decent. Some have argued that it needs more lighting actually. Some trip and fall hazards have been mentioned.
Maybe
actually-
we should just move that we close the meeting. We can talk if we want, but let those guys go.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
at this point
let's-
we can adjourn and take the field trip and then from there, be done.
So unless
And,
he's bringing
s-
his shoulder-mounted infrared camera.
Ken, you're not following us, right? That wasn't what. Yeah.
September 4, we're back with Hannaford, right?
Correct.
Day after Memorial. Okay.
So I
So
would,
I'll see you guys then.
move to close the meeting.
Okay.
And then go on our field trip.
Are you walking?
I think we should drive, because I think
You
Jiffy
too.
Mart would be a good one to look at and